Well, Pat, welcome to the podcast. You're sort of a bit of an icon in rowing. Sort of one of the first guys to start doing high quality sort of rowing content that I certainly saw on the internet. Welcome to the show, and I'm looking forward to hear sort of what you got to say.
Thanks for having me, Ben. First, to be fair, this is the first podcast I've ever done, so
Is it?
I hope I don't nosedive your podcasting career, but let's give it a good crack.
Yeah. So, you sort of you'd rowed a little bit before you went to Newcastle, but is it at Newcastle where your sort of YouTuber sort of vlogging started?
Yeah, so that was I'd been out of the sport for a few years, pretty much since I stopped at school. I went to King's Chester.
Hmm.
I was out 2013, and I think like the summer of 2015 was the first time when Henley was recorded. It was on TV. It was on BT Sport.
Yeah.
Um, And I kind of like I had in my mind, I was thought like, okay, I reckon I can plan a comeback and probably do that in my final year at Newcastle.
Mm.
But when I saw that Henley that was on TV, it was on BT
Yeah.
Sport, I was like, right, okay, I definitely want to get back there.
Hmm.
And but I also thought like there's also like at the time like vlogging just started to become big-ish on like YouTube. It's nowhere
Hmm.
near as big as it is now. You know, like everyone's doing it. Every man and his dog is vlogging these days. But um, yeah, Casey Neistat was a huge influence for me,
Hmm.
and I thought, hang on a sec, I could take like two passions there. I could take like filmmaking, and it was like I'd not really done any filmmaking before that, but it was the first sort of filmmaking that seemed like accessible and
Hmm.
doable. I could give that a crack, and I was like, I could sort of intertwine two passions here. And so I was like, well, if I go back, why don't I sort of like document that journey of like what would be a real cold start of going back to it? Like I wasn't fit, I wasn't really in any sort of good shape. Um, and
And I think
I did,
that,
yeah,
yeah, that sort of journey into that, I think a lot of people were keen to watch that, and I think that sort of shows in that channel. And I think there was a bit of a void there. There wasn't really anyone doing that at the time for rowing, and like you said, there was that bit of a
100%,
boom
yeah,
in terms of vlogging. But
yeah. Well, I think like I did like market research to be fair,
yeah.
for one of a better word. So I was like, well, what's out there at the moment? I was like, has anyone
Hmm.
else got this idea? And I remember typing in like rowing blog, and it was like two guys sort of sat in their bedroom, like in their
Hmm.
chair, just like saying, "Hey guys,
Yeah.
I've just done my 2K this morning," but it was like really like mundane.
Hmm.
But I also know that I knew that there was like a demand for that sort of content because even like the most back then anyway, the most basic rowing videos could pick up like towards 100K views.
Yeah.
So I was like, people clearly want that sort of stuff, and I was like, I think there is a bit of a gap in the market here, and yeah, and it proved out to be right because the first, I mean, yeah, it definitely exceeded expectations in terms of like the viewership that was there. I was like,
Hmm.
oh, this really is working. Um, so yeah, there was definitely demand there, and I just got lucky, really, the right place, right time.
And I think part of the content that you captured, and I think that's something that even now there's sort of a new gap that's formed since since you kind of moved away from it, is there's loads of content online of people saying, "Oh, rowing's really hard, and I'm working really hard, and here's a video of me rowing." But I think what you
Mm.
captured was a lot of the sort of behind the scenes stuff. So there's stuff like you getting ready and like interviewing, or not necessarily interviewing, but sort of having chats with people away from the sport, like
Mm.
aside and potentially like the other things you're doing outside of the sport. And I think that not only captures a bit more audience, but it sort of makes the whole thing a lot more relatable and sort of engaging for everyone almost. And it kind
Yeah,
of just makes rowing seem like something that you can do and isn't just this thing that like Olympians do and cry in Sierra Nevada.
yeah, for sure. I wanted to try and show like the human side of it, and like going back to what I said about the Case Neistat thing, it's
Hmm.
like he was kind of just showing like the basic stuff about his day, but he was just doing it in like sort of creative way,
Yeah.
filmmaking. Um, and I was like, just having seen the content that was already out there in the rowing area, it
Hmm.
was all just like GoPro footage or someone doing an egg test, or no one really showed like any of the bits outside of rowing, and
Hmm.
that was like human touch, I thought, and that's the sort of stuff that people engage with. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that engagement point, like I think it's so easy when you watch stuff like the boat races just happened a couple of weeks ago, and they
Mm.
absolutely love showing people like standing up in their lab coats, like doing like sciencey stuff, and and sort of they also show just them training all the time, but they never show kind of the stuff that's outside of that, and I guess that's quite hard to capture from like a bigger media perspective, and like you're not going to follow
Yeah,
someone around all day. So I think that what you managed to offer was like a really good insight.
but I think you want
Um,
to show like intersection of people's. Um, you want to show an intersection of people's like passions
yeah.
and their lifestyle. Like you don't just want to focus on just one pursuit. I think that's because it's the same with everyone. Everyone's got they're juggling multiple different things, and you want to show how you juggle it. And that's where like the relatability comes from.
Hmm.
Uh, it's not just like the rowing itself, but it's like intertwining with everything else because that's what's universal. That's what's universal. Everyone has that same sort of situation.
Hmm. And I think as well, there's a lot of content online at the moment, particularly where instead of well, it's sort of content has to be relatable nowadays, and I think you're seeing that in a lot of brands, even like huge brands, and now not necessarily going, "Hey, look how cool our product is." It's like, look at the people using our product, and I think
Mm.
that's potentially like an angle that needs to be looked at with rowing as well. Is that piece of sort of yes, rowing's cool and like we love rowing and we love going quickly, but to an outside audience, like seeing six boats just kind of float down a lake isn't that interesting, I guess. And I think it's
Yeah,
just starting to get to the point where people are realizing actually we need to show the stuff. So uh, you see things on World Rowing where people are like interviewing outside of the rowing course, down the side of the race course, and like I think it's the commentary and the things like that that really make sports interesting. Like I'm sure you've watched sort of
mm.
Drive to Survive, like F1 can be quite boring, and I must say myself, I've fallen asleep watching
Yeah,
the Formula One races before, like, especially after a tough session. Um,
yeah,
but then you sort of watch Drive to Survive, and it sort of creates that drama and creates that energy, and then you sort of listen to the commentary during the racing as well, and I think that adds so much to it, and it makes something that's not necessarily that engaging quite engaging.
yeah, for sure. You want to know the backstories, like rivalries. Again, yeah, it just comes back to like the human side to it, doesn't it? It's
Mm-hmm.
like um, there's a lot more to it that people can relate to, and that also adds like a bit like it dramatizes it too to an
Mm-hmm.
extent. Um, but yeah, I would say as a sport, like rowing is definitely not like the most marketable sport, is it? And there's probably like all sorts of reasons you go into for that, and like that probably hasn't incentivized people to be so creative with it as well.
Mm.
Like perhaps they're starting to. That's why they're starting to make these changes, like the beach sprints and stuff like that, and all like shorten the course. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, there's never people haven't really been like that incentivized, I guess, to be that creative with it or to like tell stories. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say yeah. With regards to like the commentators, there's some great commentators out there, like Martin Cross. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
so lucky to have someone like that that's like shares such a passion, but is also such like a great storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I would say it's a shame there isn't like there aren't more brands haven't sort of come into the space.
Mm-hmm.
But again, yeah, that might just be to do with like the marketability of the sport, and like, hopefully people can be a bit more creative, and we can start to like push the bounds of the sport a bit
Mm-hmm.
more to make it, yeah, I guess more entertaining. Like the reason we're not obviously we don't do it to entertain people, do we? Like there's all sorts of reasons to why we do the pursuit,
Of
but
course.
you do to push the sport on. I think it needs to sort of go out to a bigger audience, bigger market.
Mm-hmm.
Because like things like running and cycling, I would say from like a content perspective, of just like it's been like a hockey stick. They've really taken off on Instagram, and so
Mm-hmm.
you have to you would want to think about like why is that? Like why is that sort of like I guess from like a cultural perspective, it's yeah, it's become a lot more creative. People started making content with those sorts of sports,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think it would be good if we saw rowing follow the same path. But I guess yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and like in terms of actual content that you can make with rowing, obviously you can do the stuff outside of the boat. And I've spoke
Mm.
with Rory Cruikshank from Allmark One about this as well, like talking about sort of what we can do inside the boat to make like that a bit more engaging, and like what sort of shots we can do, and how we can present rowing differently
Mm.
because obviously
Yeah,
you can follow a boat down a course and it's just kind of going to look the same the whole way down
yeah,
as someone
100%.
that's done that. Like,
Yeah, like when I was vlogging, like I was always keen to try and like for each sort of season, I was like, right, okay, I want to make sure I'm doing something new and a bit more novel. So I was like
hmm
I was keen to like keep pushing the camera angles, see, like, experiment with what what's not been done before.
hmm
I was keen for. I never got around to it, but there's like this third person, sort of, how do you say it? You've got like a belt, and then the camera is on an arm, like
hmm
sort of coming off your back,
yeah,
and it would be like sort of looking over your shoulder, almost like a third person view,
yeah,
which would have been, you'd either had to have like sat at bow or been in a single.
hmm
But I always thought like something like that would have been pretty cool. Um, yeah, I was always keen to try and think about what I could do next to show like a different perspective because yeah, like the sort of like more primitive things were just like GoPro suction cup on the stern,
yeah.
and no one could really touch it for like a whole session, so you just got an hour and a half of like
hmm
stern or bow footage, which kind of sucked.
And then
But
there's just the classic, oh, I forgot to turn it on as well.
yeah, I've got a story about that. My last race, I was keen to um, film it. It was
Mm,
Pairs Ted in October,
yeah.
and Max Secundus lent me his GoPro and went down the whole course, and then turned out I hadn't I hadn't pressed record, which is just hilarious considering that was the end of my rowing vlogging career. I didn't even remember to turn it on, but anyhow,
Yeah, and I think that there just is that sort of thing. I think there's almost a little bit of culture of like, I guess, cringiness towards rowing photography and stuff because there's often the case you have to ask your coach, hey, can you get some footage of me? And
yeah,
I think that can be quite a difficult thing to do. And I think there
yeah,
needs to be like a bit of a culture shift almost with that in mind of sort of getting that footage and getting that content. Otherwise, it's not going to exist.
for sure. Yeah, I got a few points on this. Yeah, I can't remember whether it was at school or uni or maybe at there's one Thames session where there was I remember there was like four GoPros rigged to the boat or something from different people. Yeah, everyone wants to sort of get their bit, but yeah, it's interesting. You do have to sort of put yourself out there. When I went to Newcastle, I will stress this.
Mhm.
When I went to Newcastle, I knew no one there,
Yeah.
and so I saw he's like, who's this ginger kid who's just rocked up, and he's coming January, and he's got a GoPro strapped to him,
Mhm.
and I was fairly like self conscious about that, but
Mhm.
it pays off. Like if you um just ignore that sort of like self conscious feeling, just put yourself out there. People
Mhm.
respect it, and they like confidence, and then if you turn around, some good product and get good images of people, good vids of everyone else, that they love it.
Mhm.
But yeah, you do have to. Yeah, there is a cringiness element to it. You're right. You just have to get over it, really.
Yeah.
Like maybe it will become more mainstream. But
I'd like to think so as well because I'm sort of I've just started up a bit of a program with a few guys I used to row with where basically I'm going to try and help them build their brand as rowers and I guess sort of follow in the footsteps of people like yourself in terms of making that rowing content and hopefully try and
yeah,
attract some brands in.
good on you.
And if you had to give some sort of tips for them and those guys, like how can they capture what they're looking for?
Um, just with regards to like telling their story in general.
Yeah, exactly. Like telling their story and sort of like I guess trying to get over that cringe factor as well of how can
Yeah,
they
I
do
mean,
that and then
yeah, look, I don't think it will ever go away.
mhm,
It's like you just have to care more about the feeling of what could be on the other side of it.
mhm,
Um, even so, when I went to Thames as well, same similar situation to be honest. Even though it was like tried and tested, and people were asking me, like when you're gonna start vlogging,
yeah,
um, but I never felt quite ready to do it, and I delayed the
mhm,
process all the way up until like I don't think started because I started at Thames in like November,
mhm,
and I didn't really pick up the camera until March or April time. And that was just through fear of looking stupid,
mhm,
And even though this is something I'd done over and over again, when I was doing it at Rec, so like when it really sort of kicked off, so like 2018, 2019
mhm,
season, that was just me and my mate George, and I had no fear of that.
mhm,
But yeah, even after the channel had sort of got like thousands of views and thousands of subscribers, that's fear was still there.
Hmm.
Um, and to be fair, I would say it's almost like a regret of mine. It's like not having committed from the very start,
Mm.
because I think what I was waiting for is like some sort of, when I was at Thames anyway, it's like some sort of success before I felt confident enough to like put the story out.
Hmm.
I don't think I felt confident at the time where I was like outside of the fifth A to say like, oh, this is my first vlog and this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
Uh, I had to wait until I started like climbing the ranks, and I sort of like back told the story.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say it's not a huge regret, but I'd say if I were to do the process again, I think it almost would have looked more impressive to tell everyone, yeah, this is my first vlog and it's not going to plan right now.
Yeah.
But like stick around, see what happens, rather than like waiting for the success to happen and then telling the story.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'd say like what you're asking, it's a fear everyone has. Like I don't think it goes away. You just get a little bit more used to it, and you have to take the leap, and that's why it pays off, because there is a bit of like leap of faith there.
Mm. And at the moment, there's obviously a bit of a shift between from what might have been sort of 5 years ago, that sort of longer form content, sort of 10-minute videos. Now we're looking at things on TikTok and Reels where it's like, if it's over 30 seconds, people aren't going to watch it. What sort of content do you think is better? Because you sort of work with content yourself as well. What sort of content do you think is more applicable
Yeah,
to that format?
yeah. Look, if I want to like build a massive audience,
Hmm.
if I want to reach as many people as possible, I'd probably go all in on Reels and TikTok and probably Instagram, to be honest. It never really interested me that much, like the short form videos. Like I would play around with it as like from like an experimental perspective
Hmm.
and see, maybe what sort of numbers I could generate. But from like creative aspects,
Yeah.
I was never really that interested in doing it.
Hmm.
Like I love having like the time to tell the story, and like the YouTube format suited me
Hmm.
way more. Um, but if I really wanted to do numbers, like there's people do crazy numbers on like if you look at your explore page, people really pop off, don't they?
Yeah, of
Uh,
course. Um, uh,
uh,
I guess
yeah.
with that again in mind, you sort of saw the documentaries before the boat race this year as well, by Benedict Tufnell, and I thought they were great, and it was an awesome thing to watch. And then you
Mm,
also sort of had the Boys in the Boat a few months prior to that. I think
mm,
there's loads of different types of content, and from what I understand, the Boys in the Boat movie didn't really do that well in the box office, and I
right.
think the documentaries, while I think from a rower's perspective, it's really high quality. I really enjoyed them. I don't know how much it is doing for sort of engaging people outside of the sport of rowing. What do you think we
Yeah.
can do as rowers to try and make the sport seem more appealing and sort of more engaging for people that either brands or people that aren't part of that sort of inner circle?
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, Again, I think it comes back to like telling the human side.
Mm-hmm.
Because from my perspective, like I did really enjoy like the technical aspect of the sport, and like self development. But self development is such like a broad um, concept.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't just one of the things that really amazed me about the sport was like all the spin off benefits you got from getting better and better.
Yeah.
Like if I structured my life correctly, like if I was to do well in the sport of rowing, like I noticed that other things would go better in my life as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like something that's not spoken about enough, and I think because it's such like an elite pursuit for a lot of people, maybe that's not like the case. Some people neglect a lot of what else goes on in their life,
Mm-hmm.
in the pursuit of like doing better at rowing. Um, and so maybe there's quite a lot of that, but I would say just talk about more about like the bits around it. Because what I was going to say is I was never like that pedantic about like technique, or I never like I'm sure like loads of my crewmates would vouch for this, but I was never like too anal about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that kind of worked out in my favor, because I was always grateful to be there and doing it.
Yeah.
I would never like kill myself over slipping up.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it's like part of the process. Um, So yeah,
And I
I
think,
think if we could talk more about like the like being a bit more holistic about what people actually get out of the sport, not just the medals and not just like getting a fast time, stuff like that, I
mhm,
think it would start to attract a bigger audience.
it really is about the friends you make along the way.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, I like all my favorite people I've ever met my whole life. They at some point in time, or it probably was they all came through rowing.
Hmm.
Um, Most of them like dropped off, years ago. Um,
Yeah,
they stopped a while ago, but the sport still introduced me to them. And yeah,
yeah,
it's
and I
just like
think I
yeah,
could certainly say the same in terms of my best mate that I met him through rowing at school. We started in year 8, and he's sort of been a bit of a rock all through my life. And equally, the guys at Brooks that I met there, like they're all people that I know that I can fall back on those people, just because you form such strong bonds with these people because you're always in the exact same place. Like
100%.
you've done
Yeah,
the
and
same
I think
training sessions and everything, and
yeah,
it's
yeah. Everyone describes rowing as like the type two fun. Like it's not that fun at the time,
oh yeah.
but the session it's like it's really rewarding. But I think that sets you up so well for anything else that's like worth achieving in life, like business,
Hmm.
because you don't you have to knuckle down in the moment, and it's not you're not getting that short term reward. It's very much a long term reward. And I
Hmm.
think like rowing sets people up for that sort of success, as long as they can translate it over. But other sports weren't quite like that, like rugby, cricket, football. They're all very enjoyable to do in the moment,
Hmm.
but the rewards from them don't quite compound in the same way.
Yeah.
So it doesn't quite like give you that blueprint in your head to then apply for other
Hmm.
pursuits.
Yeah.
But rowing did, and I think when other people around you that you probably rode with, you've all felt that as well. So you feel like you can rely on each other.
I think it's also that you've got that aspect, and you were sort of talking about how you've got that type 1, type 2 fun. And I think the a big part of rowing is that there's almost one goal for pretty much every rower, certainly in the UK, and that's like the Henley Royal Regatta. And I think that's something that anyone that's done rowing or started rowing knows about, and that's sort of something that anyone can set their sights on. It's like the last regatta of the season, and it's like such a good goal for anyone that started rowing to sort of aim towards, because it's this sort of cumulative event that's sort of the biggest event, the most media followed event for other than sort of the boat race in the UK certainly, and it's such a great thing to be a part of, and it's just this thing where everyone at the start of the year can go, okay, I want to go to the Henley Royal Regatta, and then
Mhm.
everything you can kind of do is working towards that one point, um, and it's almost like an attainable thing because everyone can set their own goals within it as well. It's sort of, do I want to qualify? Do I want to make it through a round, or do I want to win? Um,
Yeah,
and that sort of one goal across the whole rowing community is such a sort of great like bonding experience, I guess.
yeah, for sure. I would say that um, almost anyone could, if they really wanted it, if they were within the right age bracket, from like
Hmm.
30 and under. But even older, almost anyone could really set their sights on actually winning it, especially like the club events.
Hmm.
Uh, you probably would have to be in like the right location and the right club to do so. But if you stick at it over enough years, I think like it is quite a winnable event if you have a long enough time horizon. And that is the
Hmm.
kicker. Not everyone has like years and years to commit to it. They probably want something in a bit more short term.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think that's probably a reason for that as well. Like it is a winnable event,
Hmm.
and everyone kind of some people probably deem it to be unwinnable, but I think yeah, in the back of everyone's minds when they first start out, they think, oh, like maybe one day,
Yeah.
um, like maybe one day this is actually doable, and I
Hmm.
think that definitely helps everyone sort of relate.
Yeah, and I think on top of that as well, there's sort of, because rowing is, as a sport, it's not massive. You can even go as far as to say, okay, now I've sort of got to a point where getting on the national team is doable, and then getting onto the senior team is doable, and then suddenly, like I remember, even as I was a junior, um, we sort of did the GB trials, and then everyone at school was like, "Are you going to go to the Olympics?" I was like, that's quite the step, but it's sort of a step that you can actually perceive, and I think
That
that
is true. Yeah, yeah. I thought. I guess it is like a smaller pool compared to the rest, like to other sports.
mm,
But I couldn't believe. Yeah, well, as a junior, the thought of like getting a GB vest, which I never did. I got to final trials, but it was still very it was definitely within arm's reach.
mm,
Which is crazy. Like that's not typical to be able to do.
mm,
Um, but and yeah, and it is quite like segmented, like the steps. Obviously, if you were to go to like Coop in your lower six, then go to Worlds, and
yeah,
under 23s, you've got a good few years, a good few stabs at that.
mm,
So it is like the process is broken down like quite nicely, I'd say, and each step probably is quite doable. Um, Obviously that depends on loads of things, but relative to other sports, yeah,
mm.
I mean,
Yeah, and I think that's another reason that is so engaging as and like you can get so hooked into it, and you hear of people that sort of, especially at sort of Brooks, and it's like I'll just do one more year, one more year, one more year,
yeah,
and I'm sure
yeah.
you get that at all clubs everywhere, but there's very much that like one more time, one more shot to get your goal done, and
Yeah, 100%. There's always, yeah, I guess, yeah, it is quite, it's really well like striated. Like there's always like a, a sort of sensible or logical next step.
mhm,
Um, and that falls all the way down to like your ergs as well.
yeah,
You could always push for a better erg time or like 2K time. And that's really nice. That's probably why people are so motivated within sport because there's always something that's very individual, like very
mhm,
personalized to you that would be meaningful for you as a goal to hit. And
mhm.
that's why people don't seem to be able to like step away.
Yeah, and I think that again lends itself. Like we talked about how rowing isn't necessarily engaging for outsiders, and but
Mm.
being it's such a great way of like you can tell stories so easily with rowing. Like everyone has their own story within the sport, and that's not necessarily something that you'll get within other sports. Like if I guess you're a footballer, then you kind of maybe you'll make your way up, but not many people will make it past like Sunday
Yeah,
league.
I think
Um,
it's also because yeah, there's so much like hardship involved in it that like
mm,
where you have hardship, you have like great stories to tell.
exactly.
The emotions are way higher. People invest so much more,
Hmm.
um, and it's like a real story of like transformation. It's like where you have hardship and people stick at it for enough time, like you've got a huge like amount of adaptation that can be involved in that process.
Yeah.
And they're the stories people love. Like everyone wants to see like other people develop because
Hmm.
then I think they can do the same thing.
Yeah, and I guess it goes back to again that sort of the story of the boys in the boat, where it's those kind of like humble guys that end up working their way up and working their way up and working their way up until they're the Olympic champions with Washington Uni. But I think a thing with rowing that sets aside like rowing from other sports is that that's genuinely an achievable thing, and it's a thing that you can see in almost every athlete that's gone to the Olympics or won Henley has gone a similar pathway, and I don't think you can say that for many other sports. Like in football, you'll sort of get kids that have like been scouted from Brazil and they've like done whatever and then ended up playing for Man City and winning the World Cup or whatever. But you'll also get kids that will not have done that, and they're kind of just like David Beckham. I don't know if you've seen that documentary. That was just his dad that told him, "Hey, you're going to be a professional footballer. You can play for Man United," and that's what it is. And I think
Yeah,
there's very much like I don't think you see that as much in rowing. You don't get people that have been like born to go and like be a rower.
yeah, for sure. It's interesting. Like a few things to that. I remember I spoke to Harry Brantmore went to my school.
Hmm.
I spoke to Harry like a few years ago, and I was asking about Brooks, and he was saying it's kind of nice how it's almost becomes like a level playing field once you get to Brooks. It's like people that have
Mm.
been to schools or clubs that weren't quite so talented or had that breadth or depth. It's like
Hmm.
once they get to Brooks and they get like put into this system, it's just like whoever wants it more.
Yeah.
It's kind of like any sort of natural talent is it's like negated from just like sheer willpower,
Hmm.
um, which I think is pretty awesome. But yeah, and I think that's one of the things that one of the reasons I stuck with it when I first started. Like I wasn't any sort of like natural talent with any of the sports, but
Mm.
I couldn't believe that it was one of the first processes I tasted from a young age, where what you put in is what you get out.
Hmm.
Other sports
Yeah,
like
for sure.
natural talents would lend themselves a little bit more to it. And yeah, people would say, well, rowers are fucking massive and
Yeah, I
long
guess
levers
I
and shit like that.
can't.
But yeah, but I would still say it's not as much of a factor as it is in other sports.
Mhm.
I would say there's nothing more powerful than just like the compound effect, which is like having your foot to the gas.
Mm.
That's probably the most important thing, and that's what I got taste for when I first started, and that's why I stuck at it as well.
And I think there's a bit as well. Like you yourself went to Newcastle, and like there are guys there that have sort of worked their way up, and there's people at Newcastle while you were there that were sort of winning events and getting their way into the GB team. And no matter where you are, like you're sort of surrounded by people that have done cool things, and they
Yeah,
might not necessarily like they look like you, and they
yeah,
like
you're always like one handshake away from like an Olympian, I would say, in the sport.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah,
which
and
that's like, yeah, which is massively motivating, I'd say, because like it means you're like one conversation away from like hearing the process of what it takes to get there, and
mhm,
that conversation usually just involves like just putting in the work. Which
mhm,
you're like, okay, we
yeah,
can all do
exactly,
that.
and
So everyone knows that.
And I think that no matter what club you're at, that's the case as well. Like I know, obviously at Brooks there's a big thing like everyone talks about sort of the travelator into the team or whatever. But even at Marlow, there are places like we've got Pete Chambers, who like an ex-Olympian. Uh, he went to the Olympics and he's just the junior coach at Marlow. And you've got people
Right.
all over the place where, like, if you ask them like who their coach is or someone at their team, like someone has done something, and I
Mm.
think it just makes all those goals so much more accessible. And I think on the same page, like I think every clubhouse I've ever been to for rowing has got the pictures on the wall of the crews that have won Henley, and
Mm.
again that just makes those goals seem so much more attainable.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think whoever ends up with like some sort of success, they can. It's kind of nice because they can then take that success, and it's almost like arbitrage. They'll take it to an area of the country
Hmm.
where they can sort of provide the most value,
Yeah,
um, and then they can sort of spread that knowledge or spread like the technical aspects as well. And that's probably why, because they all of a sudden they have knowledge that is really valuable to other clubs, and
hmm,
yeah, I think you see that happen a lot in rowing. So
yeah,
yeah, everyone sort of knows what it takes. Doesn't matter really what club you're at.
yeah. Of course. I'm just gonna. I think we can kind of wrap up here. I think like you've given some really good insights on what we're looking for in rowing, like that sort of mindset that everyone's got going towards goals within rowing, and then how we might be able to sort of promote that going forwards to new people and make the sport like more engaging and like more exciting for outsiders as well.
Mm.
And I think thank you, I guess, for sort of opening that door to a lot of people. I think, and by creating that content, I think that was certainly a step in the right direction for the sport of rowing as a whole. And I guess I, for one, am certainly excited to see um, what can spawn from this. And like we mentioned earlier, you sort of talked about how Reels and Instagram and TikToks and things like that is a platform for like widespread content creation. But I am definitely keen to see like more high quality content being uploaded onto YouTube and things like that. And you've got people
Yeah,
like Eamon Glavin as well.
yeah,
That
I'm surprised more people haven't done it. To be fair, I
mm,
I would say there's way more. Or maybe people are, they just haven't quite like permeated through the cracks yet.
mm,
Um, but I would definitely encourage more people to do it. It's like such a rewarding process to do,
mm-hmm,
even from like a self-development perspective of like put yourself out there, telling a story, developing a few more like digital skills like content creation and posting on YouTube. I think there's
mm,
loads of spin-off benefits for it. Um, I would like, urge people to do more of it because the sport does need it.
yeah. And you yourself, you've managed to sort of build a bit of a career off the back of, I guess, the skills that potentially you learnt off that as well. And
100%.
what
Yeah,
what
I mean, my career wouldn't exist if I hadn't done it.
mm-hmm,
Like the reason I got into it, the reason I got hired as an in-house videographer,
mm-hmm,
was because I did the vlogs. Like I was working at a company every summer, a few summers whilst I
mm-hmm,
was at uni, they saw the vlogs and they were like, "Would you make in-house content for us?" And I was like, "Fucking yes! I don't know how to do biomed." Like, I was in my third year, just thinking like, I do not want to be doing this for a job.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do? And then this job offer came through in like probably April or May time of when I was in my final year at Newcastle, and I was just like, yes, I cracked it. And I was like, thank God I just put myself out there, because I kind of I was going to get to do a job that I really would be interested in. So yeah, spin-off benefits, man, they're huge.
Yeah, of course. And I think aside from just like potentially getting a job as well, I think building a brand within your sport or anything really is such an important thing to do, particularly in a world where like social media is such a like a lot of people I would say are more present on social media than they are in real life almost, and I think that's something that you could definitely use to sort of promote yourself and build a bit of a brand and a bit of an image, and that's certainly going to help you in the long run, I think, if done in the right way, of course. And I think that's something that could definitely help out the sport of rowing, and like as athletes as well, it's certainly an untapped thing. And I think a lot of clubs, that's something that clubs can do as well. And I know loads of clubs, like outside of uni teams, like obviously uni teams can get funding from university and things like that, but like smaller clubs don't necessarily get that much funding, and that's certainly a way of getting that interest and that brand interest and finding sponsorships and things like that.
100%, I agree. Because like at the end of the day, I was just like a one-man band. Like within, I had like the infrastructure around me when I was at Newcastle, when I was at Thames, and also when I was at Rex, I was using like a boathouse and stuff. But I was still like, I was the sole driving force behind the content. Like if you think about the resources that a whole club would have in terms of like generating this sort of content, there's way more opportunities to do so. It's just like they're quite scared to take the risk to do it. But like it's old adage, like where there is risk, there is reward. So you just have to do it. And like I think maybe clubs are scared about getting it wrong or slipping up or like saying the wrong thing. But no risk, no reward. But there's so much more people could be doing. Like if you think about the big clubs, they could churn out content for sure. They just have to enable it.
And I think you can sort of look over at US uni teams as well, and they are always posting stuff and publishing stuff and making high quality videos, and like obviously they get a lot of their funding from like alumni and things like that, and that those videos are often pointed at those people. But I think there are certainly ways that clubs in the UK could do that, or even unis in the UK could do that, pointing in whatever direction they want.
Yeah, I like Australian clubs are very good at it as well. Like I remember when I was, this was maybe before I started blogging. I remember seeing some like awesome cinematic vids coming from like Australian clubs, and I think they just got a videographer. So it might have been like a friend from someone in the club, or maybe like an athlete within the club who was like, just get them a camera and a gimbal and see what works. Put them in the launch, and like just get the athletes involved. Like, what do they want to showcase? Because everyone loves, people. When I would record content of sessions, people are like, can we see the footage? Like, can we see this? Can we see that? Like, everyone wants to see themselves on camera. Especially like when they're rowing, like maybe there's like a technical reason for that if people want to see what they look like from a technical aspect. But yeah, I think people definitely want to be involved in that sort of process.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of topics today, and thank you very much for taking their time. And
Very welcome.
Yeah, I really hope that people can get something out of this and learn something, and potentially even be inspired to go off and make their own content. So yeah, if you're listening at home, then take what you've heard from this guy who has been very successful in the world of rowing and media, and let's see what we can do.
Yeah, and best of luck to you as well, man. I hope this podcast goes on to do better and bigger things, and you get some good content out of it.
Cheers, thanks very much.